What's up, guys? It's Eric from Rare Candy, and today we're actually kicking off the first video in a new segment that we're going to be doing going forward called Battles on a Budget. And this is actually probably one of our most requested types of videos here. One thing I see in a lot of the comments on the deck profiles that we've done in the battle videos is, people always are looking for alternatives to Shaymin, and they say, some of these cards are just really hard to get their hands on. And, especially Shaymin in particular, probably that and Versus Seeker are probably some of the hardest cards to get. If you're just starting out in the game and you're trying to get all these play sets of important cards that are in every deck, it can be a little off-putting. So basically, I wanted to do a video segment going forward that kind of breaks down some fairly competitive decks without any of these cards, and we'll either substitute them with similar stuff or just try to avoid playing decks that require them at all. Greninja, for example, is a really popular archetype right now that, is fairly cheap other than Versus Seekers. So, we're going to try to do stuff kind of along those lines. And like I said, we're going to be playing without any of these really high dollar cards and see if we can still make some competitive decks for you guys who are just starting out to try to mess with. And even for, some players who are still competitive and, into the game, like very hardcore, a lot of these deck ideas, like even this one, are still viable. I think even without cards like Shaymin, for example. So that's why we picked this deck. We're doing Wobbuffet Crobat. It's actually a deck that doesn't rely on Shaymin whatsoever. We have replaced Versus Seekers with some more budget-friendly options, but even still, it's a powerful deck. I was testing this out on PTCGO here, and even beat some top-tier type of decks like Night March with it. So I think this is a solid budget option for anyone getting into the game. So let's just get right into it and break down some of the card choices that we have. So we'll start off with Wobbuffet. He's probably the main attacker of the deck. And one thing that makes him so good is this ability, Bide Barricade. As long as Wobbuffet's your active Pokemon, each Pokemon in play, each player's hand, discard pile, etc., has no abilities other than Psychic Pokemon. So this is really powerful. Most decks in the format play Shaymin, so if you start with this guy, your opponent can't use Shaymin's ability to draw more cards. So decks like Night March, and Vespiquen Vileplume, and Mega Rayquaza, these are all decks who really rely on a heavy count of Shaymin, and they don't have as many supporters as maybe some of the other decks because they're more reliant on this ability-based draw, and Wobbuffet totally shuts down Vileplume's ability. It shuts down so many good abilities in the game, so very strong card here. And then the attack is Psychic Assault, 10 damage plus 10 more for every damage counter on the defending Pokemon. So with the Crobat line that we're going to get to, we're going to be placing damage counters and then using Wobbuffet to kind of clean up all these knockouts. So we're playing 4 Wobbuffet. Like I say, he's the main attacker, just going to max him out, and that gives us the highest odds of starting with it. We're playing 3 Unknown. Really cool card I like in this list, just because we can't play Shaymin even if we were going to play, a non-budget friendly version of this deck, we would still not play Shaymin. So having Unknown in the list gives us a little bit of extra draw power, because Unknown has the ability Farewell Letter. If Unknown is on your bench, you may discard him and all cards attached to him. If you do, you may draw a card, and it doesn't count as a knockout, so your opponent doesn't get a prize. So with this, and we play Bridget in the deck, so you can bridge it for maybe a couple of bats and an unknown, or maybe like a bat and 2 unknowns. It just fits really nicely in the deck and gives you some extra draw power that you don't really get since you don't have Shaymin. So I like this as an inclusion. And especially because, too, if you open with Bridget, a lot of times you don't have a supporter to follow up on the next turn. So you can grab a couple unknowns along with, maybe another Pokemon that you really wanted to get off Bridget. So that's why I like Unknown in the list. Next up, we have our Zubat line, just the standard 50 hit point Zubat. But really the main reason we're playing the bats is for the Golbat and Crobat. So Golbat has Sneaky Bite. Whenever you play this Pokemon from your hand, you may put 2 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon. So, like I said, we're going to kind of like ping away at our opponent's Pokemon with these bats, and then kind of use Wobbuffet to clean up all of our knockouts. And then it also has the attack Swoop Across, does 10 damage to each of your opponent's Pokemon. And finally, we have the Wobbuffet, or I'm sorry, not Wobbuffet, we have the Crobat. We're playing 2 of these guys. So Crobat, really integral part of the deck. 130 hit points, Surprise Bite. Whenever you evolve into him, you put 3 damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon instead of the 2 like the Golbat has. And the attack, just Skill Dive for a colorless, does 30 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon. So we're mainly playing the bats for the abilities, but since we play Dimension Valley, we actually can sometimes attack with Crobat and Golbat and help set up more knockouts for our Wobbuffets if we have to. So it can be a decent attacker. And all of the bats, other than Zubat, have free retreat as well. So, you know, if we have to start with one of these guys, we can always evolve into Golbat second turn and retreat into our Wobbuffet. So just lots and lots of synergy between all of the Pokemon in this deck. So, on to the trainer cards. We have 2 Level Ball. Yep, this can get our Zubats, Golbats, and Unknowns. So, seems good. I like at least 2. I'm just going to jump over to the Ultra Balls while I'm on the subject matter. So, we're maxing the Ultra Ball out at 4. That way we can grab anything. We can grab Wobbuffets, Crobats. You can debatably cut this down to 3 and opt for 3 Level Ball if that fits your playstyle better. I just decided to max out Ultra Ball instead, just for consistency purposes, really. But like I said, if you wanted to do the 3-3 split between the 2, I think that's fine as well. But you definitely need, I think, at least 5 search cards like this in this type of deck, just because you really want to swarm all these bats and get as many down on the bench at one time as you can. So next up we have our Versus Seeker replacements. And to be honest, I don't think this type of thing would be feasible had a Random Receiver not just been reprinted in Fates Collide. So Random Receiver, you get to reveal cards from the top of your deck until you hit a supporter, put it into your hand, and shuffle the rest. So actually before Versus Seeker got reprinted back in Phantom Forces, every deck played Random Receiver. Usually a 2 to 4 count. So this is, it's not Versus Seeker. You don't have all the late game benefits that you get from Versus Seeker by, being able to retrieve supporters you've already played and discarded. But actually in the early turns of the game, Random Receiver is actually better, just because, I'm sure we've all had games where, we open up with a hand, but we don't have a supporter, but we have Versus Seeker, and it's just sitting there taunting us. So in the early turns, Random Receiver is actually a better card, I think. So I think this really enables, newer players to be able to start playing with more semi-competitive decks until they get their hands on a playset of Versus Seekers. So, even though we're playing Random Receiver, we're also going to play 1 Pal Pad. It's a card that kind of saw a little bit of play back when it first came out in Flashfire. You shuffle 2 supporter cards from your discard pile into your deck. So this is really important because we do have a couple of tech supporter cards that we'll get to. And, if we have to discard them early on with like a Sycamore or something, we do want to be able to reuse them at a later point. So Pal Pad, we're just going to play 1 of these and 3 of the Random Receivers. These are our Versus Seeker replacements, and I feel like that does an adequate job of, filling the same kind of role that Versus Seeker normally would in a deck. Okay, up next we have 1 Super Rod, just for some recovery. Shuffle any 3 combination of Pokemon or basic energy cards from your discard back into your deck. So, if you have to Sycamore away some pieces of your Crobat line early on, you can get these back with Super Rod, and even use Unknowns over and over. I think that's kind of a cool utility that Super Rod gives you. So yeah, it's always good to have usually 1 of these recovery types of cards. You can debatably switch it to Sacred Ash just because you play Dimension Valley, and you're not typically very energy reliant, since all of your attackers cost either 1 psychic or 0 energy. So I'll let you play with it. I just opted for Super Rod just to give us the maximum amount of flexibility though. Okay, since we are playing the Crobat evolution line, we do want to keep reusing that Crobat and Golbat's abilities, so we're going to play Super Scoop Up 3 of these guys, flip a coin, if heads, put 1 Pokemon and all cards attached to it into your hand. So this is kind of cool. Like I said, it lets us reuse Crobats and Golbats. If you're playing against a deck that typically takes 2-hit knockouts, you know, maybe, trying to think of an example, maybe like Greninja or something like that, like a deck that doesn't just knock you out with 1 attack. You can also use this as a healing card, or if you start with an unknown, you can potentially Super Scoop Up, put it back into your hand, you know, promote something else, and then put the unknown down to be able to use its effect while it's on the bench. So Super Scoop Up is a really good card, and it just fits really nicely in this type of deck. Okay. So up next for Trainer's Mail, just another good consistency card to have in pretty much most decks. Look at the top 4 cards of your deck, reveal a trainer card you find, and put it into your hand. Then you shuffle the rest. So really good at just helping you hit those trainer cards, you know, when you need them. Okay, we already covered Ultra Ball. And I'll cover the last item card we have here. So we have 4 Bursting Balloon. I really like this card in Wobbuffet Bats. I know it's been more popularized by Trevenant and, you know, the Trevenant break decks, but I love this card in this deck because, you know, it's you know, the bats only put a couple damage counters down at a time, and especially if your opponent heals or, you know, has a way to remove the damage by a scoop up card of some sort, they can nullify what little damage you've done very easily. And so it usually takes a while for Wobbuffet to get going to hit big numbers with its attack, but Burst Balloon, if you have it attached, really helps speed up the process. So Burst Balloon, you know, if this card is attached to one of your Pokemon, you discard it at the end of your opponent's turn. But if the Pokemon this card is attached to is your active Pokemon and is damaged by an opponent's attack, even if it's knocked out, your opponent's attacking Pokemon takes 6 damage counters. So that's really, really good. If they, let's say, attack into a Wobbuffet with this on it, that puts 6 damage counters on it, and then you can attack it with a Wobbuffet the next turn to do 70 damage. So that puts up to 130 very, very quickly. Then combine that with the extra damage that you have from the, you know, the Golbats and Crobats, and you can easily kind of start building up all of this damage to take knockouts with your Wobbuffets. So I love this card in this list personally. Some people might prefer Muscle Band, but Burst Balloon is really good, especially against Night March in particular. Night March and Vespiquen decks, because they typically take big knockouts, or, you know, like big one-hit knockouts. And this really helps you, you know, even the prize exchange, because they're normally much faster than you. So I love this card, really good. Like I say, you can test out Muscle Band if you want, but just from what I've played with this, I think I favor Burst Balloon personally. Okay, so for our supporters, we're playing 1AZ. This is one of those tech supporters I was kind of mentioning. It's just a one-of, so you put one of your Pokemon into your hand and discard all cards attached to it. So it's another way to let us reuse our Crobat line. So especially against item lock decks, we won't be able to play Super Scoop Up. So if you play against something like a Vileplume deck, a Trevenant deck, or, you know, Seismitoad EX, you still have a way to reuse all of your Golbats and Crobats, you know, even without the use of Super Scoop Up. And then, like I said, we have Pal Pad in the list, so we can shuffle this back in if we do need to reuse it at a later point. So we have 2 Bridget, really good card in this type of deck, since we pretty much exclusively play non-EX Pokemon, and we really need to get a lot of Pokemon on our bench early on. So if you can open up with Bridget, or maybe hit Bridget off a random receiver or Trainer's Mail, on your first or second turn, you're usually in pretty good shape. So it lets you search out 3 basic Pokemon other than EXs and put them onto your bench, or just 1 basic EX. So really good in this type of deck, I believe. So we're playing 1 Lysander. A lot of decks usually play 2, but since we're spreading damage with the bats, a lot of times you don't actually need the Lysander in certain cases, especially against Night March, because you can actually just take knockouts just from placing damage counters on the bench. And Crobat can also attack the bench as well, so I feel like 1 is just fine in this type of deck. And then for our main draw supporters, we're playing a split of 3 N and also 3 Sycamore. So N, luckily we just got this card back into the format with Fates Collide. Each player shuffles his or her hand in her deck, then draws a card for each of her remaining prize cards. Each of his or her remaining prize cards, sorry. So this is a deck that kind of slowly builds up damage. So a lot of times you will go down in prizes, you know, maybe 1 or 2 before you really get going. So N is a great card in this type of deck because, you know, as you're starting this setup, you can really punish your opponent and limit their hand size, while you still get to draw a lot of cards. So really good as a disruption card and just a general draw card, because there's going to be certain times where you don't want to Sycamore certain things away. So it's nice to have a good alternative to that. Okay, and like I said, we also play 3 Professor Sycamore. Discard your hand, draw 7 cards. Really good, self-explanatory. And then to kind of close out our trainer cards, we're playing 4 Dimension Valley. So each psychic Pokemon pays 1 colorless less to attack. So what that means is our entire Bat evolution line attacks for free, and then our Wobbuffets only attack for a single psychic energy. Debatably, you can actually cut this down to only 3 copies, because there's so many different decks that take advantage of Dimension Valley right now. Night March and Trevenant are 2 really good examples, and especially going forward, if we see more decks that use Mew become more popular, and maybe Alakazam as well, you're going to have a lot of decks playing this card already for you, so you might not need all 4 copies. So if there's another card you really want to fit in this list, I think you can maybe cut 1 Dimension Valley. I think that'd be okay. But I just opted to go for 4 just to max it out, just for optimal consistency. But like I said, feel free to play around with it, see what works for you. And then for our energies, we're just playing 2 Mystery and 6 Psychic. So Mystery Energy, it can only be attached to Psychic Pokemon, and it gives them 2 less retreat costs, which is really big because Wobbuffet has a 2 retreat cost. So yeah, so I feel like only 2 of these is really necessary. Between these, the AZ, and all of the Super Scoop Ups, we can usually get Wobbuffet out of the active spot, you know, when we need to. And playing a lower count like this also makes us less susceptible to things like Xerosic, you know, Enhanced Hammer, Giratina EX. So I like it. You can maybe go up to 3, but I really don't think 4 is necessary at all in this type of deck. And then, like I said, just 6 Psychic Energy. So pretty low amount of energy, but like I said, we're only attacking for 1 Psychic, or in some cases 0 energy if we're attacking with our Bat evolution line. So yeah, guys, that is the deck. Feel free to test it out. You know, like I said, this is actually a pretty, I want to say competitive or semi-competitive deck, even without the Versus Seekers. You know, it shuts down Shaymins and a lot of the strong abilities that we have in the game. You can pick off things like Night March, like Vespiquen. You know, there's a lot of like small, you know, evolution decks, you know, that have these small basics, like even the Greninja deck, for example, and Trevenant. You know, they both have these low 50-60 hit point basic Pokemon they have to evolve from, and the Crobat line can shut down their abilities and pick off these small Pokemon for you. And you know, not to mention that the prize changes, or the prize exchange, is really good against EX decks, because everything you have just gives up 1 prize, and everything that they have gives up 2. So I think it has somewhat decent matchups, to be honest. But yeah, guys, so that is the deck. Feel free to try it out. You know, let us know in the comments below what you think. And yeah, I hope you like this type of video. I'm going to try to do more of these going forward. And if you saw our merch announcement video, we also have another new type of video in the pipeline that we're working on, that we're going to be doing on PTCGO going forward as well. So lots of new stuff coming at you guys. And you know, if you have any suggestions on what types of videos you guys want to see, leave them below in the comments. And you never know, your request might get it might get honored. We might listen to your feedback. So that's it, guys. I'll quit rambling. Feel free to like and subscribe, and we will see you guys for the next one, okay?